Hey, welcome to this episode with my good friend Dan. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. So, Dan was originally a teacher, and then he went into instructional design and learning design. He's done some really exciting stuff, in multiple avenues. And so I'm excited, and currently at a really cool ed tech company. So I'm excited to have you here and to have you share like your path and advice. And I know you're going to be teaching those in our course, some really cool things too. So Dan, take us back to kind of the earliest stages, you in the classroom. Tell everyone, just what you taught and whatnot.
Sure. So I guess I'll say I was a history teacher,
Right.
but my path to instructional design was a little more direct probably than many of the people who are participating in this today. And so just a little about me. I was at university trying to fulfill my degree in history. So I wanted to be a history professor. And about my senior year, I kind of realized that wasn't really what I wanted, to be a history professor. And so I started looking at other options. And the most obvious option was changing my major to history teaching, for secondary education. And so I went ahead and did that. And kind of knowing that, like, even though I loved history and I loved teaching, that probably wasn't like my last stop. I was probably going to move on beyond that. And so I was already kind of thinking, what do I want to do after teaching or beyond teaching? And as I was doing coursework for the teaching aspect of my degree, I had to take a class in this department that I'd never heard of before called Instructional Psychology and Technology. And that was the Instructional Design department on campus. And I took this class and I absolutely loved it and just fell in love with instructional design and the use of technology to aid learning, and ended up being a TA for that class. And eventually I did my student teaching, teaching world civilizations at a high school in Springville, Utah. And after the fact, I actually went abroad to do some additional coursework elsewhere. And so when I got back to the States, the contract year had already started, and people knew that in advance. So I didn't get a teaching job that first year, and I ended up working as an assistant teacher for about half a year. And then I decided that I wanted to go and do my master's and my PhD in instructional design. And so I did some substitute teaching and some other things like that until I got into the program. And that's how I got into the instructional design program and kind of went from there.
That's so great. For those listening, like a lot of people that go into instructional design, a lot of them feel like they ended up there accidentally. Like they'll work for an HR department, or they'll work for a different department of a company, but then they get put in charge of creating a training or some kind of learning resource, and they didn't plan on going into instructional design, but then they're kind of assigned to it. So being really intentional about your path shows hiring managers and others a lot about you, and that you really want it. So that's really great. Okay, so Dan, tell us then. So Dan went the academic route, obviously, with going into instructional design. You went straight to a PhD program, is that right?
I did a master's then a PhD. But I was doing them concurrently. So
okay, great. And then I know that you had some really exciting opportunities. I remember when you posted on Facebook forever ago about like, so I'm in DC and I'm presenting. Anyway,
right.
Tell us just a little bit about like your journey, and then how did you choose where to apply?
Sure.
And things like that.
So what you're referring to is the class that made me fall in love with instructional design. The cool thing about it is when I became a master's student, I had the opportunity to teach that class. So my very first semester as a graduate student, I started teaching the class that introduced me to instructional design. And I taught that class for about 5 years. And as a part of that work, I ended up partnering with other people who were teaching it to create an open badge system, which is a way of micro-credentialing. And I won't go too much into that, but it was something that really took off in the department. And so I found other teaching, because the department was teaching this course specifically for pre-service teachers, right? People who were going to become teachers. And so I found other departments across the nation who were also, training pre-service teachers. who had a similar issue. And so we started actually sharing this, this badging system with other universities. And we ended up creating kind of a coalition where we could make more badges and more instructional modules to train these would-be teachers on how to use various technologies. And that got the attention of the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology. That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
And so they invited me to a White House summit to present on some of the work that I'd done to education leaders from across the country. So
Yeah.
very exciting. And then how did I get started at Imagine Learning? So I was actually working on my dissertation for my PhD, and Imagine Learning had a guest speaker, an expert on blended learning who was going to be speaking. And they sent out kind of just a broad call to say, hey, you know, we have this expert coming into town to speak. Anyone who's interested in learning more about blended learning, you know, we'd love to have them come. And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. I mean, I was already familiar with blended learning, but I, you know, wanted to go and hear about, hear this person speak. And so afterwards, they gathered some of the other people from my department and tried to pitch us on the idea of being an intern at Imagine Learning. And I wasn't particularly interested in that at the time. However, they mentioned that they were doing some stuff with gamification of learning. And that was actually one of the things I was researching as a part of my dissertation. And so I expressed some interest in that. And they connected me with the right people at the company. And basically I said, hey, you know, I guess I would be willing to be an intern working on that project particularly because it was just something I was interested in. So they brought me on, and I was an intern for about 3 months, just part-time as I was doing my other stuff. And I started designing some really cool stuff, and they wanted me to stay longer, so I extended my internship again. And they still wanted me to stay longer, so I was like, okay, well, if we're going to do that, then I think I need to just go full-time here. And so that's how I got my start at Imagine Learning. And ever since, I've kind of carved my own path to the point to where I am today. So
Great. Yeah. And I hope that they were paying you after, you know, for that internship.
yes.
Having been there as long as you were. Great. Okay. Tell everyone a little bit about Imagine Learning, where you're currently working.
Sure. So Imagine Learning is an educational technology company, or EdTech. And we have about 8 different product offerings. And so we have programs for language and literacy, mathematics, assessment at varying grade levels. And we also have a program called Imagine Espanol, which helps teach Spanish. And so the company started initially as just one product to try to teach English language learners how to be proficient in English. And it's really just kind of grown from there. So
Great. And I know some of our friends that work there, like I'm thinking of Holly. Anyway, some of our friends are like graphic artists, and they do some of the amazing, you know, artwork that's in what they make and whatnot. How many teachers, I don't know how much the employees there really discuss, like, here's everything that I did in my work life before being here, but how many educators would you say are at Imagine Learning? Is it pretty common or not very common?
I don't know how many, but a ton of people who are there came from education. So many of our instructional designers were former teachers. Many of the people who work as salespeople and as customer support were teachers as well. Some of our product managers were teachers. Really, like, there's almost no part of the company where there wasn't someone who was previously a teacher. One of our developers was a teacher at one time, in fact. So.
I hope this is so encouraging for everyone that's listening to that. Like, I know that that's really encouraging to everyone listening to that. What are some of the strengths that you see that those former classroom teachers have that lend themselves really well? Like, yeah, for those who are listening, what would you say? Like, here are some of the teacher strengths that are playing out really well. And maybe you don't think of them as like teacher strengths. You're like, no, those are just people skills, or those are communication skills. And so can you highlight any of those for?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, so it certainly depends on the role that you're playing, but obviously having an understanding, having been in that position is really powerful, right? Because you have that background, that understanding. However, one of the things I think you have to be careful about is that just because you were in that role doesn't mean that you still understand that role today, or that you understand the particular need that this one teacher has. So I think it's a really powerful starting point to have had that experience. But at the same time, you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to empathize with the user, which is something I'll talk about a little more later.
Great. Yeah. And speaking of, you know, you've mentioned like program managers and developers and all these people. For those who are listening, can you tell them kind of the structure of the company, like an organizational chart?
So the structure is pretty weird, but I'll try to simplify it. Essentially, we have a couple different departments. We have the curriculum department, where we have instructional designers, most of who are former teachers. And then we have another department, the engineering or development department. So these are programmers who help make the, like they actually develop the activities, because many of the instructional activities we have are more complicated. And so they're built in a gaming environment. And they also just build the platforms that we use to put instructional content online. Another department we have is the product experience department, which is the department that I'm in. And so we have UX designers, or user experience designers. So these are people who design user interfaces, if you will. A lot more than that too, but we'll simplify it.
Kind of the look, or what you click on, what the process is like.
Interactions, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Good, great.
We have artists and writers and audio folks, video folks. And then another team is the product managers. So the product managers, in a sense, own a product. And really, we all own the products, right? But they're the ones who, from a business perspective, kind of make decisions about, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, or we're not going to do this and that. And oftentimes you have to prioritize and say, we know there's multiple needs out there, and we've went out and we've talked to people and tried to understand the needs. And of those needs, we feel like this is the most important and the one that will bring the most value to the customer and to the business right now. So we're going to focus on this one, and then we'll move to the next one.
Great description. Yeah. The owner, decision maker, kind of the head over it. Excellent. Okay. And then sales department, customer support, I assume.
So Imagine Learning sales department is actually distributed. So we have sales folks living throughout the country, and they go out and they meet with administrators and other folks. And honestly, it's just trying to get your foot in the door and trying to talk to people and trying to start to have some of those conversations about what the products are and how the products could benefit students. And
do those people in that role, do they work exclusively for Imagine Learning, or are they an educational reseller and they sell products for a lot of different companies?
Our folks work exclusively for Imagine Learning. There are some resellers in other countries, I believe, but we're mostly in country. And our folks work directly for us. We do have some folks who do training for us occasionally, who are more on a contract basis. But yeah, our sales folks and our normal customer support people work full-time for the company. And
I know a lot of teachers in our community are very interested in training also. Could you let us know, are those training roles or positions, are they on site? Like, do they train in person, or are they web-based trainings?
Sure.
What's most common?
So there's actually two different roles, and I'll be totally honest, I don't fully understand some of the differences there. I think the ones that are part-time are more like maybe some type of onboarding trainings in certain areas. I'm not sure. Yeah. But the main role is our customer service managers, and they do both on-site training and at a distance through webinar or other means. And those trainings could be anything from just getting started with various products to very specific needs that a particular school has. And so they might create some kind of training that's specific to that school.
Great. And so if it is an on-site training, then they are flying out to a different state. Got it.
And those customer support folks actually do live in their various areas, but they cover, a pretty good sized area too. So there are still some times where they're hopping on flights, or certainly when they're driving several hours to go from one school to the next. Yeah,
this is so great, guys. I mean, we're getting so much background and insight into different roles. Dan, thanks so much for that. Okay, well, so some of the people in our community have asked a few questions about how you actually landed the job. So obviously you had, an internship, and it was a very natural progression of things. For those, like those who are in our course, can you tell them about resumes? And I don't know if you've ever been involved in the hiring process of anyone at Imagine Learning.
So many hiring. So one of the biggest things I would say is have portfolio projects. If you have something in a portfolio, just a couple of things where you can demonstrate what you've done and who, kind of what your process was, and you can show that, that's super powerful. I mean, we get, so many different resumes, and one of the things that I always look for is let me see what you've done, and not just the end product, but also the process you used to get to that point, right? Because to me, those are both important. I want something that's good in the end, but I also want to make sure that you're using processes that are the most effective.
Great. So portfolio, not just showing end product, but a process as well. This is great for everyone to hear. And I know that those in our course are like, awesome, I'm working on my portfolio right now. So this is excellent insight. Okay. Anything resume wise, or do you give more, like more value to the portfolio?
Honestly, I'll look at resumes for maybe 30 seconds. But yeah, the portfolio is what I want to see.
I totally agree. Completely understand. Definitely.
But obviously, the more instructional design that you can put on your resume, the better it's going to look, and the more likely you are to get through, to me, because honestly, there are HR people who are filtering stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I can still technically see those things, but they're going to probably they're going to emphasize, certain people over others, right? Based on the criteria that they have.
Excellent. That's so great. And some people also have questions about compensation. For those going into instructional design, from what you've observed in the ed tech world, compared to the salary of a teacher, do you see most of them enter at about the same pay, a little less, a little more, or any insights or kind of pro tips on that?
So I would say that probably on average, instructional designers are going to make more than teachers, especially teachers who maybe only taught for a few years. So my wife actually worked at Imagine Learning for a while. And when she came on board, she actually got a raise. She'd been a teacher for 16 years. And so when she joined Imagine Learning, she actually was making more, and she was already doing all right as a teacher.
And I just want to add on a personal note, she and I taught in the same district, and we all lived in the same neighborhood before the two of you were married. I just love that we're like so connected. So fun.
All kinds of connections. Awesome. Yep.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's kind of ironic is that I was, when I started at the company, I was finishing my PhD, and to be totally honest, I kind of negotiated my way into a position. And so I didn't try to negotiate salary too much. And she actually started in her position making more than I had started at. So
wow. Way to go. Yeah.
I make more than her now, but at the time when I had started compared to when she started, she was making more than me. Yeah.
Good for her. That's awesome. That's awesome. Great insight. Very good insight.
So
we'll have to have her on in another episode so that she can explain that transition that she had from the classroom too.
So yeah, that 16 years of teaching was not lost on the people who hired her. So
that's so great. I know everyone's probably like, oh, I want to ask her a lot of questions. So we will definitely have her on. I'm looking forward to that already. Okay, so let's come to a couple more of our questions, and then I know you have some awesome instruction that you're going to give as well. What are some of your favorite things about what you do and where you work? Yeah, things that you like and that other teachers might like as well.
One of the things I like is just solving interesting problems. And so that's actually kind of my position, right? Is I've created this unique position at the company where anytime there's like this big hairy problem, they just give it to me, which is both a blessing and a curse. But it keeps life interesting because I'm always working on something different, right? And so that's one of the things I really enjoy. And I really enjoy being able to do really innovative things. So instructional design is such a broad field, and what instructional design looks like at one company could be very different than what it looks like at another company. At one company, you might just be literally making some, documents on Word and like sending out a, almost a form. Hey, here's some basic, instruction. Make sure you've read through this thing, At another company, you might be making something that's, maybe more visual, but it's still, very passive. And it's, hey, we have to have compliance training, and really we're just trying to check a box, right? And so, I mean, that's kind of on the far end. And on the opposite end is where I like to live. And so one of the cool things about being an educational technology company that I really love is that the instructional design isn't just something that goes along with the product, or isn't just something that's being used internally. It is the product. So that means it gets a lot more attention. It gets more money dedicated to it. And so you can do really innovative, interesting things.
That's such a good insight. Yeah, because at an ed tech company, or an educational company, well, at a different kind of a company, instructional design is oftentimes, that's part of training.
Right.
Or that's part of, if you need to learn how to do this aspect of the job. But at an education company, education is the company. And so the instruction is that central figure. Gosh, what a really good point. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell everyone what is a regular day at work like?
I knew you were going to ask me that. My regular days, I don't have regular days, but typically what I will end up doing is I spend a lot of times in meetings because I'm the director of my team, but I'm working with people from other departments to try to understand what the current needs are, um, where we're hung up in our process, and how we can get past those hangups, what the next aspect of the design is going to be, how that's being developed, answering questions. Right now I'm working on a project around assessment. And part of what we had to do for this is create some item types or templates, if you will, that the assessment designers can then use to ask students questions, right? So, I mean, you have obviously the regular multiple choice question that everyone's seen, but there's more technology enhanced items out there. And so I designed and built these technology enhanced item types, these templates that the assessment designers are then filling with content. And so I'm spent a lot of time in the last few months revising those because we're constantly trying to make improvements, right? And so we're seeing, oh, you know what, this thing isn't quite working. We need to go back and tweak this. Or, oh, you know what, we have a use case that we didn't account for. We might need a new item type to address this use case. And then I go and design and create that and iterate on that.
That's so great. I hope the context of all of this is giving everyone really good insights into like, okay, and they've got people that write assessments and people, you know, and they're doing user testing and they're trying things out with students and like learning audiences. So great. Yeah.
I'll point out too that these assessment designers, while they're not instructional designers, I mean, the difference between instructional design and assessment design is just depending on, you know, a company like mine, we make a difference between that and we specialize. But you know, another company is probably the same person doing both, right? And these assessment designers, many of them are former teachers as well. So
That's so great. Okay, excellent. And for our teachers out there, can you clarify for them how could they have any insight into if they would be a good fit as an instructional designer? If this might be something that you would enjoy, like here are some good indicators.
So, I mean, I think the best way is if you can land an internship. That's a great way to get to know a company, get to know what it's like, because I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face, and you can hear about other people and their experiences, but until you experience it yourself, you don't really know. And so that's the best advice I could give. Other things is that if you spend more time like preparing materials because you're trying to get them just right, your teaching materials, or you really enjoy making, you know, PowerPoints that are really interactive or they're really, you know, sing, so to speak, and you really care about those kinds of things, this might be a good thing for you. If you don't care about those things, that doesn't mean that you won't be a great instructional designer. That's just one of the things that I was always passionate about and that really connected with me for this instructional design, because it's these elements of design and trying to make these really slick materials that are effective.
Yeah, making something that your learners can really, excel through, be able to access and enjoy. Yeah, if you're enjoying like ideating those things or creating those things, I think that is one of the best indicators out there. I also remember my last year of teaching when we were living in the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I sought an internship for a company that I really wanted to work for, but I was still teaching full time. And so it was just interesting to think about how, I don't want to say desperate I felt, but like I just wanted and needed to change so badly that I was like, okay, if I did this and if I needed to drive 40 minutes to be there each day, I could get a sub for like the last hour of the day. Just the things I was brainstorming to try and like have an opportunity to try it hands-on, you know what I mean? But so many teachers, the things that they're already building and creating for their classes do go very cohesively. And if we can find the opportunity to create learning materials for adults, I think that shines through in a resume or in a portfolio so much more. Any other advice for teachers, or two tips for transitioning teachers?
So one tip is learn as much as you can about design and learning. So there's so many learning theories out there, and instructional theories and theories about instructional design. And the more that you can read on those things and just learn about those things, the more tools you're going to have in your tool belt, so to speak. And the other thing I would say is just do it. You know, find projects that you maybe in your classroom or, you know, friends or local businesses, and just find little projects that you can take on, even if it's not for pay, and just try it and just start to experiment with the things that you're reading about. Because one of the things that I think we do poorly in education in general in this country is that the instruction and the theory are separated from the practice. And so if you can read and apply, and then read and apply, or rather, as you're trying to apply, you come across something you're stuck on, and then go find the answer, man, that really brings together the theory and the practice.
Well said. So well said. And as far as how you mentioned, find projects or things that you can work on, if it's your class, if it's your school district or friend, I love seeing the projects that the teachers in our course are creating. If it's this week, some of them have had courses on breastfeeding, and some of them have had courses on sleep apnea. And so just such a broad spectrum, but seeing what they have exposure to and experience with, and others are on, training teachers on some reading elements. So it's like an adult focused training. It's just, yeah, the variety.
Very cool.
Our only limitation is really our imagination when it comes down to it. So love seeing those projects. Thank you for your tips. Thank you for all of these insights. This has just been really fantastic, and we appreciate it.
You're welcome.